You know, we all love a good mystery, right? A shocking crime, a bunch of clues that make no sense, and then one brilliant mind who puts it all together. But what if the biggest mystery wasn't just who did it, but who actually invented the rules for how these stories are told? Today, we're diving into a forgotten book that might just be the blueprint for every detective story you've ever read.
So let's set the scene. It all starts with a crime that is just pure nightmare fuel. A young, successful guy named Henry Moreland is murdered, literally on the night before his wedding. He's found in the middle of a dark, raging storm, and the whole town just spirals into chaos. I mean, it's the perfect crime. No witnesses, no clear motive, nothing. And part of what makes it so perfect is when it happened. You have to remember, this is 1866. There are no forensics labs, no fingerprinting, no DNA, forget about CSI. The police are totally stumped. Back then, investigations were all about finding obvious clues or getting a confession. So a subtle crime like this, it was a dead end. It really looked like the killer was going to walk.
And that's the big question, isn't it? When the official methods just aren't cutting it, who are you going to call? Well, the answer wasn't a cop or a police chief. The answer, it turns out, was a brand new kind of hero.
Okay, so this is where the dead letter completely changes the game. It introduces us to a man who's going to solve this crime not with a badge and a gun, but with something way more powerful, his mind.
Let me introduce you to Mr. Burton. He's not a policeman. He's a retired merchant, he's got his own money, and he gets into detection simply as a labor of love. He's just fascinated by why people do bad things, and he has this deep need to see justice served, all while working completely outside the system. Sound a little familiar?
And this chart just shows how totally groundbreaking he was. On the one hand, you have the police of the 1860s. They're public, they're official, they're looking for the obvious stuff. But then you have Mr. Burton. He's secretive, a civilian. He doesn't just look for clues on the ground, he looks inside people's heads, using psychology and quiet deduction to piece together the truth.
So what exactly were these amazing new methods? Well, Burton's toolkit wasn't a magnifying glass and a funny hat just yet, but it was a whole collection of techniques that would pretty much define the detective for the next century and a half.
Let's break this down. First, he analyzes people's character just by looking at their handwriting. Second, he has this incredible ability to notice trifles, these tiny, insignificant details that everyone else just walks right past. And third, he doesn't just interrogate suspects, he applies psychological pressure. He uses calm conversation to basically corner them until the truth just comes out. The guy practically invented the modern interrogation. You know, that first point is so unique, it actually gets its own name in the book, calligraphy. Now, today we might call this graphology and kind of write it off as pseudoscience, but in the novel it's presented as Burton's secret weapon. It's his methodical, almost scientific way of profiling a criminal just from the marks they leave on a piece of paper. This quote from the book just says it all, doesn't it? Just like all the great detectives who came after him, Burton can see an entire universe of meaning in things a normal person wouldn't even glance at. He shows us that the tiniest little detail can be the key that unlocks the entire mystery. He's not just solving a murder here, he is creating the entire method.
Okay, so it's a really clever story, we get it. But why does a forgotten book from 1866 really matter so much today? Well, because when you start to look at all its pieces, you realize it's not just a detective story. It really is the blueprint.
Just think about these classic elements. A brilliant, kind of quirky detective who works outside the official channels? That's Mr. Burton, check. A loyal but maybe not quite as sharp narrator who tells us the story? That's Richard Redfield. He's the original Dr. Watson. An investigation that's all about brain power instead of firepower, all leading up to a dramatic reveal where everyone's gathered in a room? Check and check again. Every single one of these is now a pillar of the genre. And now, look at this timeline. This is where it gets really interesting. The Dead Letter, which was written by a woman named Metta Victor, by the way, using a male pen name, came out in 1866. The very first time the world ever heard of Sherlock Holmes wasn't until 1887.
That is 21 years. An entire generation separates Mr. Burton from Sherlock Holmes. For 21 years, the basic formula for the modern detective, the brilliant amateur, the sidekick narrator, the focus on pure logic, it was already out there, in the world, just waiting.
It really forces you to rethink the entire story of the detective genre we thought we knew. We all know Sherlock Holmes, but maybe it's time we all learn the name Mr. Burton, the quiet American detective who laid all the groundwork, more than 2 decades before anyone ever set foot on Baker Street.
This is for entertainment and educational purposes only.